Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out the radio version of the show every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on WDJY 99.1 in Atlanta. We also air on a podcasting network in Los Angeles called the 405 Media. There's a TV version of the show that airs on KMVT 15 in Silicon Valley at 8 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday nights. Both versions of the show air in other states. For these show times, plus past episodes, please visit the show's website at buildingthefutureshow.com. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Angela and Saki, co-founders of Reigningit. Guys, welcome back to the show. I'm excited that you guys are kind of growing this thing and everything's kind of really taking off for you guys. So guys, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having us, Kevin.
Yeah, so let's maybe, before people, or we get into kind of Reigningit, let's maybe get to know each one of you a little bit better. And so maybe, Angela, do you want to maybe kind of give a bit of a background on yourself? And then Saki will let you do that in a second as well.
Sure, sounds great. So I'm Angela Cleveland. I am based out of New Jersey. I have been a school counselor for 15 years, and I love that profession. It's just the best way to really affect change with our students. School counselors are, champions for all of our students.
Sure.
And I was recently awarded with the New Jersey's School Counselor of the Year Award for 2017.
That's great.
So that was, woohoo! Thank you.
Yeah.
Those are really exciting. But on the heels of that, I was also facing some other opportunities that were coming my way. So with school counseling, what makes that profession unique is it's the only K-12 profession where we are charged with impacting students both individually and on a systemic level. So we look at some barriers for students accessing educational opportunities, like big picture systemic issues, and then also looking at individual students and families and how to support them. So I started to really think about what I was doing as a school counselor and how I can affect change on a larger scale. And working within the confines of one building and a school just really limited me from addressing systemic issues within this nation. So I had an opportunity to join the National Center for Women in Information Technology. It is a national nonprofit, and I have been hearing about all the work they're doing from the women we're featuring in our blog. So I've been hearing such great things about them, and it turns out they have a division called Counselors for Computing. And within this division, there's outreach to school counselors across the country to talk to them about some of the systemic barriers that students are facing, talk to them about opportunities in computer science, and really how when school counselors are addressing career education, which is a responsibility from a K to 12 level, a lot of people are only thinking it's high school, but it's really K to 12. When they're addressing opportunities, they really need to think about what are some upcoming trends in this nation. And so really the thing is, when I graduated, I was given a diploma, not a crystal ball, so I don't know what jobs are coming up. But the one thing we know with certainty is that every job is going to have technology integrated into it in some manner. So the best way that we can prepare students for sustainable careers is to talk about how every career intersects with technology. So my new role is consulting for the National Center for Women in Information Technologies division called Counselors for Computing. And I just joined them this past July 2017. And it's been wonderful. I really feel like the outreach that I'm able to have right now is so much greater than what I was able to do in one school setting. So I'm doing that. I've taken on a professorship role at a local university, so I teach career counseling to graduate students as well.
Very cool. Well, congrats on the new role. It seems like you're doing some really interesting kind of cool things, right, that you're passionate about, and it kind of ties into kind of what you're doing with Reigningit. So, Saki, do you want to maybe kind of give us a bit of background on yourself? Because you, I understand, have a career change as well.
Yeah, sure. It's been a big year for both Angela and I. So
That's
I
great.
started off as a career counselor. I was working at a number of schools in the Boston area. I started off at MIT and then later Harvard Business School. where I was talking to students one-on-one about the gamut of career topics, resumes, cover letters, mock interviews, negotiations, how to find the right internship, full-time job, and then how to make the most of it once you're there.
Sure.
And then through those jobs, always had a desire to work on the flip side on recruiting. I'd see all these employers come in during career fairs. It seemed really exciting. So I just wanted to see what that was like and being fast-paced. So alongside that, also had the California bug. So ended up ultimately going out west. First, I worked for the Walt Disney Company for a year for their corporate sector, basically hiring business interns, accounting, finance, real estate, things and the like. And while that was really exciting from like a brand perspective, just ultimately realized that like the biggest opportunities right now are in tech. And so ended up in the Bay Area for the past 5 years, where I was at a startup called Square,
Sure.
and their mission is economic empowerment. You may have seen them in like food trucks or small coffee shops or cafes, just enabling small businesses to be able to take credit card payments and really grow. So it was really exciting. And also I love that it was such a mission-driven company. It wasn't, just for profit. There was a real reasoning behind it. And that was really what tied the entire company together. So from 2012 to 2017, the company grew from 300 employees to 2,000, which was a really interesting opportunity, but also just kind of crazy in terms of a hiring perspective. But really loved the university setting. I was doing campus recruiting there. Excuse me. And during that time is when I really saw the stark differences in terms of women in tech. Like I remember the first year when we were meeting to talk about a program with our women's community, literally we could fit everyone into a handful of people in a room, maybe
Sure.
10 or less. And then by the time I left, the women in tech community was so big that, we had our own Slack channels and affinity groups and all of that. So
That's
it
great.
was really amazing to see how it grew and how supportive it became. But it really opened up my eyes to, what the challenges are. And of course, in the last couple of years, we've been hearing so much more about, situations that have happened and just how there needs to be more of a focus on that and how do we increase that pipeline and give opportunities to women, to underrepresented minorities and the like. So through all of that is really how, Angela and I founded Reigningit, just through our own advocacy efforts and desire to do this on a personal level. But ultimately, my heart has always been in education. And frankly, I think in the industry side, sometimes people think like, oh, we figured it out. We know that there's an issue. We know we need to fix it, but we really are at the top of our game. And honestly, now that I'm over on the education side, I'm actually back in Boston working at Tufts University. It's a wonderful institution that honestly, I didn't know that much about until I started, but it's as close to a sanctuary school as you can get, in the sense that they really support diversity and inclusion on all levels. That means first generation college students, DACA, anything that is under that realm. And in terms of engineering, their incoming class of computer science majors is 44% women, which I think is huge compared to honestly like the single digits that most
Sure.
Schools or institutions are at. So ultimately, what it's really taught me at this point in life is I think education and the higher ed sector, does know a lot about the space. And I think a lot of industries can learn a lot from that. And they've been really supportive about the efforts that Angela and I have for Reigningit and just continuing on that work. So yeah, Angela and I have kind of flipped in that I've come back to education and she's gone into industry. So it's just great. And we have so much to talk about. So,
Well, no, that's great though. And congrats on your new job as well. I think that's great, right?
Yeah.
And like I kind of mentioned earlier, that you guys have been on the show a year and a half or so ago. And so for people that haven't heard of Reigningit, maybe like give a quick overview of what you guys are doing with the platform and kind of how it came to be. And then we'll kind of get into what's changed since then, because you guys have been doing a lot of exciting stuff and it's been growing like crazy.
Sure. So I can talk to you about, where the idea was born.
Sure.
And then Saki, I guess, you could take on a little bit more about what we're doing.
Sure.
Yeah. So basically it's one of those moments that we always remember and reflect back on. In April of 2015, Saki was organizing a platform, a discussion at Spelman College to talk about women in tech. And it was a really great function. It was connected with the Clinton's No Ceilings initiative, and she invited me to attend. And there was a woman in the audience who stood up, and she talked about how hard she fought to get to college, to study computer science, that, it has not been an easy journey. And she was entering her first internship, and she cried as she talked about how she felt so alone, that she was the only woman, she was the only person of color, and she just felt like she didn't belong after, all this time fighting so hard to get to this point in her life. She just didn't feel like she fit. She didn't feel like she belonged in that community. And that was the moment that really resonated with Saki and me. We talked about how I as a school counselor, I was working with fifth and sixth graders. I started to see that there was, that was a point where students were sometimes making decisions about what was right for them based on their gender identity, based on their experience and their access to opportunities in the world. And Saki was also on the recruiting end seeing the results of that, where she noticed that there was some challenges in recruiting a diverse workforce because there just weren't many people there. So we sat there and we said to ourselves after this meeting, we said, we have to do something about this. Now, this is a huge problem,
Sure.
And we did not know how we were going to address it, but we just thought, this is a moment that just really resonated with both of us, and we couldn't just sit there and say, yeah, this is really awful and someone else needs to do something about this. We looked at ourselves and we said, we need to do something about this. At the time it was 2015, and we said, this cannot happen in this country. This cannot happen to our young women, to our people of color. This is supposed to be a nation where if you work hard, you can, achieve your dreams. And we realized how many challenges still existed. So we decided that the way for us to address this is to create a blog and essentially a story sharing platform where women could talk about their experiences and talk about the rewards of being in the STEM field, and also some of the challenges. So when we say STEM, really, we're looking at all the STEM fields, but we primarily are targeting the tech industry because when you look at the data, computer science and technology, that's where we still see this major gender gap. So that tends to be our primary focus in that area. So we created this platform because we wanted to address this problem on two levels. And the first level is being more proactive and creating an environment where young women, maybe middle school or high school, could look and read stories about women who are exploring the computer science industry, women who are like them, women who have some of the same challenges that they've had, and are demystifying what computer science is, that it's not someone sitting in a basement coding, that it's creative and it's about problem solving, and you can combine computer science with any area of interest. So we wanted to inspire young women. And then, we also wanted to reduce the attrition rate. So once women are in this field or they decide to major in computer science, we were hearing about how they were one of 40 in a class and just feeling like they didn't belong in the university or didn't belong in their internship or in their job. So we wanted to help those women. So that's the other level, and help them to find their community and know that they aren't alone. So you may be one of 40 in a class, but you are not alone in this, and you can find other people who might have a similar experience, and they can talk to you about what they're doing to stay strong and to, stay inspired and to stay in the field that they're so passionate about. So that was our reason for starting this. Saki, I'll let you take it from there.
Sure. Yeah. And so last week, actually, I attended the Massachusetts Conference for Women. And if anyone is in the area, I highly recommend it. It's an amazing opportunity to connect with 10,000 plus women in the community. And so there was a motivational speaker there. Her name is Verna Myers, and she had said, it's a moment for courage. Men need to support women and women to support one another. And she talked about what she considered the 4 C's of our society: cultural curiosity, compassion, conscientiousness, and courage. And I think that really does speak to where we're at with Reigningit. Look, we're not like a political platform. We're not trying to say you should be on one side of the spectrum or another. But Angela and I were just talking earlier today about the testimonials that we receive and the feedback. And the one word that always resonates is community. And that's really what we're trying to say. Shonda Rhimes also says, like, find your tribe, find your people. And that's what we're trying to do. We're like, if you identify as a woman, if you are an ally of women, and you recognize that there needs to be this movement and this time where we need to have everyone represented equally, that's essentially where we're at. I tell students all the time, it's like, look, I love Sephora, I like makeup, but
Sure.
in order to do that, I have to like go on an app or go on a website and find products. And I think no matter what you love, what industry, what product, what sector, there is a place for someone, which Angela was just speaking to before. So in that vein, we've really tried to build a community, and we've seen the numbers really grow organically. Initially it was a lot of Angela and I doing our own outreach, asking women to be part of this initiative or if they were interested. And because that's really snowballed, that's why we're seeing our numbers really highly reflected. So on our Medium, our blog page, we have 4.6 followers. So having close to 5,000 followers, I think, is really, really telling. And on our Facebook page, we have close to 6,000 women as part of this close community. So we want it to be safe. We want it to be inviting. We want it to be supportive and a space where everyone can feel open and comfortable, saying where they're at, whether they have vulnerabilities, whether they have something to offer, whether they have a question or an answer to something. So that's really where we're at right now and trying to build that. And frankly, having come from the West Coast and San Francisco, where I really saw a lot of these things firsthand, and coming back east, I'm really excited to implement a lot of the programming and initiatives over, especially in the Boston area, where I think it's so primed for growth. There's a lot of talk about GE potentially being headquartered here, or Amazon even having basically a second home base here. So there's just a lot of momentum, and what we would hear through recruiting and all the stuff that Angela and I did before is that on the East Coast, there really isn't, these conversations aren't happening. There's not a lot of programming that's supporting that. So, we initially were part of doing a number of roundtables around certain schools and meeting women around the Northeast kind of corridor, but now we really want to grow that. It's definitely a national conversation, but at least if we can focus even in person around this area, I think that helps a lot. So we are definitely involved. We're going to be presenting at like the WeCode conference next spring, and working with WeWork, which is also very supportive of women in tech, to do a panel probably for International Women's Day on women in tech, and inviting some high profile entrepreneurs to attend and just figuring out what other things we can do. I'd love to launch what we call STEM in the city. So having dinners at companies around the Boston area.
Very cool.
And it's not a recruiting pitch. It's really to, invite the community and to network, get to know one another, and really build from there. So just a sampling of the things that we're doing.
No, I love that. I think it's great. Like, it's interesting to me, because you guys have kind of come from just kind of a bit of a passion project, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but now you guys have full on doing events, and you kind of went from a blog, like you said. Well, you're still doing the blog, but you just had, and now you're doing these events, you're talking at conferences, you people are reaching out to you. It's kind of fascinating to watch this stuff kind of grow, and kind of why I wanted to have you guys back on the show, because I want to kind of I like following kind of journeys of people doing things, and kind of watching them from kind of, you guys were on a year and a half ago, and now you're back on having a conversation. So how have you guys kind of grown, Reigningit from kind of a year and a half to kind of present day? Walk us through kind of that journey.
Sure. I think it is amazing to look back, as you say, as a passion project. This really was something that was started that way, that we felt we had to do something. And we are just, I think what's helped with our growth is the fact that Saki and I really listen to the women in this community.
Okay. What's
interesting is when you talk to a lot of the women who are, there, they oftentimes don't know that she and I are the ones behind Reigningit. Just as an example, I was just recently a week ago at a conference, and there were women from, the Girl Scouts, representatives from Girls Inc., from the National Girls Collaboration Project, computer science organizations. And someone mentioned within this forum, they mentioned that I was co-founder of Reigningit, and a bunch of heads turned toward me and they said, "Wait, I follow you on Twitter. That's you." So that makes
That's
me
awesome,
feel
though.
really proud because what makes me feel good is Saki and I very much are not putting our names and our faces out there. We're creating a platform to spotlight others. So we love the fact that the face of our company is not necessarily us, but it's the mission that's behind it. And that's what makes me feel good, that it's not just, just Angela and Saki. It's something that's so much bigger than the two of us. So I think that what's helped us to really grow is that it feels like we just created this framework and then women came to us and said, oh, can you, as a most recent example, can you start a Slack channel? Because we want to have a way for us to connect with each other and share internships or job opportunities. So we did that. Someone else had mentioned some time ago, can you create a Google Sheet where we can connect with each other to find a mentor, or maybe I want to mentor someone else and give back. And we did that. So really listening to what the community wanted, what they said they needed as women in the tech industry has really helped us to grow. Saki and I didn't come in with an idea of like, this is what we're going to do and this is how, and we're going to stay focused on just this one goal. We came in with an idea that we wanted to support women. And our growth has been so organic and honest because it's really not so much coming from us, it's coming from us listening to the needs and the wants of others.
Sure. No, I think
I
that's
and
right.
I agree.
Keep going. Sorry.
And I would just say, I agree completely with what Angela said. And it makes me think back to when I was at Square and our CEO was Jack Dorsey, also the founder of Twitter. And so I would hear him speak a number of times about entrepreneurship, and people would ask him a lot of times, like, how did you start, Twitter? How did you start such a big platform along with Square? And he'd always say, it just starts with a simple question. What is something that you want to see in the world? What is something that you want to solve? And most likely, if you have that question, someone else does too, and they would love to see the answer along with you. But of course, it's not just about having good ideas, because a lot of them have that, right? It's about what do you do from there? How do you go forward? So I think almost subconsciously, Angela and I ended up doing that. We had a question that we wanted to solve, which was how do we inspire more women to pursue careers in tech and STEM and support one another? And so, as she mentioned, organically, we just kind of started putting stories out there, and then it really just took a bigger effect. And from there, we've come to the point where we are now. So I think it really is so validating to us to know that, there is that need. And we, as she said, it really depends on the feedback that we have. The reason that we are starting the Slack channel is because one of our women said, hey, what do you think about having a Slack channel? It'd be great to have more dynamic conversation. So things along those lines. So we're just trying to figure out what makes sense and, always just kind of reprioritizing based on what we're kind of hearing out there in the environment.
No, I think that's really great. So we've kind of covered it roughly, but what do you guys kind of write about when you're featuring, these different people on the site?
So at first we were wondering what we were going to ask them. And we thought, okay, well, you can write about yourself and your own stories. But similar to like a diary, it's often hard to just open-endedly, write about oneself. So we thought, okay, well, let's just start with like a cadence of questions. We'll have a set that we list, and we'll ask women if they are interested in filling them out. And it's a range because we want to show a holistic picture of the women that we feature. So, of course, we want them to focus on their technical abilities and, what is something that they excel at, but also tell us a little bit more about yourself. What are some technical challenges or personal challenges that you faced in the past? What is a song that you like to dance to just for fun? What advice do you have for other women? So just, kind of going back and forth between the fun and the serious, because that's encompassing of how a person is. And so we found over time that it was much easier for women to answer our set of questions. We had a couple who have chosen to write their own stories, but for the most part, they answer our questions. So we've done that over and over. And right now we're close to 500 interviews, which is really amazing because I think we started off posting one interview a week, maybe at most one or two. And then at some point it got to being every day, but that was just so much that we then scaled it back a little bit to like 2 times a week just to have some regularity and we could focus on other things.
So what I love about the structure of our questions is that I think, maybe subconsciously, Saki and I, coming from this psychology background and training, had really, we were thinking about these questions. And when I look at them now, and I'm really happy with the format of them, because it feels like at the end, when we always close the interviews by asking, what advice would you give to other women to reign their lives? It feels like it closes this circle. And that really comes from that counseling psychology background that Saki and I share, that you don't just kind of want to leave someone hanging with, some challenges that they've just shared. You want to kind of close that loop and bring it back. And essentially, it's a lift while you rise model. So they're talking about where they're at this point, whether they're in college or in their career or even in middle school and just starting to explore computer science. And what I love about that last question is it kind of paves the way for the next woman.
Sure.
It makes it a lot easier for her when you're thinking about that advice. So it's that lift while you rise model.
No, that's interesting. So, and like my day job, like our CEO's female, and she's been great, right? And I think, like, at least in my experience, we don't really treat her any different than kind of, how sometimes it's portrayed in the media. And I've had other people on the show that have basically said something similar, like they just go in, do their job, own it, and they kind of just get the respect. And I understand that that's not always the case, and in a lot of cases that's kind of not normal at all, right? For depending on industry and what. So I'm curious though to know your guys' thoughts on even the women that basically say that they address that there's a problem, but maybe that they're just kind of like maybe don't think it's as big as a problem as they've kind of experienced, because maybe they're a little bit of a stronger personality type, or they just kind of don't really necessarily care about being put in, just being kind of treated differently, or it's never really been a thing. And I don't mean it to be kind of like controversial or anything, but it's just I've had people on the show that have kind of said, well, it's not really been an issue to me, right? And I understand that it is an issue, but how do you guys what are your guys' kind of thoughts on that?
I think that's a really great question. And I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do with Reigningit, is giving women that platform to say that it's a multi-layered problem, solution. There's so many pieces to it. And to your point, not everyone is going to experience it in the same way. So we do have some women who, have very dire circumstances. They're the only woman in their class. We've heard stories where their male classmates have turned around and say, oh, you want the marketing class that's down the hall. You're not in the right place. Right. To others that feel that they are very well supported. So I think at whatever point that someone is in, hopefully it inspires them to say, if it is dire, that it can get better, and here is a community that can support you. Sure. Or if you already do feel well supported, then that's fantastic. And I think that there is so much more awareness going into it. We've heard about Susan Fowler's story. We've heard Ellen Powell's. There's so many others that are out there that we probably haven't even heard of. Sure. And I think because of that awareness, things are getting better and better. I know that from the recruiting standpoint, there's so much more emphasis put on, making sure that we are being fair and hiring more women, not to fill a quota or to fill a number, but just because, we want to be encompassing of all people and all backgrounds. And so things like Grace Hopper, there's so much more of an emphasis from a company recruiting standpoint. So if anyone attends that conference, you'll see thousands of companies there now. Some companies bring as many as 100 people. I know that it can be like the single biggest kind of factor in terms of budget and resources put behind recruiting women in STEM. So all just really to say that I think there are multi-layered experiences, and we want to make sure that we are inclusive of all of them.
I feel like along with that is, our goal is not to really push people to a level of awareness that they're not ready for. Okay. So we're not trying to tell people that their experiences are wrong or their belief systems are wrong. We just really like to honor where they're at, and maybe they haven't experienced certain challenges, and that's wonderful. But if that's where they're at, then it's not really beneficial for us to say, but hey, wait a second, you should feel a certain way. Sure. So we really like to honor where they're at. But I think what happens is, rather than us just jumping up and down and saying, hey, this is what's going on. Reading all of these stories and looking at the qualitative data, hearing these narratives of, women having some of the same challenges really speaks volumes, speaks so much more than what we can say as individuals.
Sure.
That information is there, and surely the data is there that backs it up as well. Sometimes people can be, if they're kind of stuck in a mindset that this has been my experience, and because of this data point of one, this is what I believe about the world, it can be a little bit tough to break through that. And so rather than butt up against that, I think sharing the stories is one of the best ways to give people a glimpse into other people's lives and some of the challenges that they're facing. We believe so strongly in the power of sharing our stories to, open minds and open hearts and change the world.
No, I think that's great. And kind of why I brought that up is because I think at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter where you are in your career, whether you're just starting out or you've been in something for a long time, or you're just starting a startup, or you've sold a startup. You have different problems, right? And you guys are basically building a community around people that have kind of are starting off, have been there, and kind of everywhere in between. And just being able to read about somebody that went through the same thing, good or bad, and potentially even being able to reach out to them and say, or just saying like, your story inspired me, or, I'm looking for this tool to solve this problem. How did you solve it in your past? That's
right.
Insanely useful, right? I think for anybody, right? It doesn't matter about geographic region or even industry, just being able to say like, I need this and you did this. How did you go about doing that? And having a network, and especially like a Slack channel or something like that to help with that is actually really great.
And I think what helps too is, as you're pointing out, Kevin, that there are certain experiences that certainly unite us across, all areas, geographic, gender, socioeconomic status, all of those things. There are certain common experiences. On the flip side of that, I think what's really helpful is there have been people who've reached out who've said, this has been my experience and I've had a pretty good experience. I maybe had some family members who were in tech who gave me some support. I had access to finances that supported me through college. I didn't really struggle, but they're reading other stories and it starts to open their eyes to their own experiences and helps them to recognize that there are maybe, they were the beneficiary of certain areas of privilege that they hadn't considered that other people didn't have access to.
Sure.
And how the lack of that access to those privileges has created some barriers that they were just simply not aware of because it was part of their world. So something that, like we may take for granted, like our families or our, living in a community where technology is talked about, or there are certain industries, like if you're out in, the Bay Area where people are talking about technology versus other parts of this country where it's not really part of the discussion, and you're growing up in an environment where maybe the main form of employment is not in technology, it's in another industry. Your world is very different.
Sure.
So I think that it can help to unite people when they talk about common areas of challenge, and it can also open up their eyes when you start to realize that, oh, wait a second, this person has had a very different experience. We share the same interest in what we want to study and what jobs we want to have, but their pathway has been riddled with barriers that I was so fortunate to not have to face.
Increases empathy essentially.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's actually kind of interesting because I think the thing is, we all do it, right? At some point, kind of Google online, or you try to ask people for kind of advice, but being able to have the resources to just kind of go to, or even just, you don't understand really how complicated or how kind of lonely it can be unless you're kind of doing a startup yourself, right? And I think even like close family and friends don't understand sometimes. Like they might be sympathetic and they might hear you out, but like and I don't even mean it mean, it's just like they don't really understand sometimes that you're right. It's like it's just you and you're starting an idea in a small town somewhere and none of your friends even have don't really use the internet other than kind of just maybe social media and surfing the web, like it can be lonely, right? But having kind of online communities to support that and even learn and kind of like, oh, I should check out this conference or, take this class or try this piece of software is hugely beneficial to anyone, really.
Right. And that's what we say ultimately to our women. It's like, you are going to be the future leaders, right? You're the next entrepreneurs, you're the next VCs, you're the next CEOs. So if nothing else, like, this is a great community to network and get to know one another with. And we see that too, to Angela's point, like, she meets women traveling at events that we are now talking to online. So it's so amazing to see these people literally come to life, right? We've heard them, we feel like we know them so well, and then to see them live, and it goes both ways. Women come to us like, oh my gosh, we're part of Reigningit, we read the stories, or they've been featured at some point, and then we also recognize other people. So now when we go to conferences, we do have meetups like, oh, who's going to be there? Let's meet up, let's have a dinner, let's have a roundtable discussion. And just one other point, like, even outside of just being entrepreneurs or being part of companies, it's also an issue with VCs, right? If you're trying to raise money for your own startup. We screened a movie called She Started It with the director Nora Pogi earlier this year, and it was following a number of women who, were trying to get their startup funded and how they are received in even the VC world. So I think that's another whole layer to it as well.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, and I think what helps with, what helps with the community coming together is, it's almost a therapeutic environment that we've created.
Sure.
Saki and I have, we've just been honored that so many women have the courage to share parts of their story that are deeply personal. They talk about some of the challenges, whether it's, losing a parent at a young age or struggling with, mental illness or, abuse or things like that. They've been very open about that. And I think that helps, it takes some of these experiences that they're not alone in, they're not the only ones. It sheds light on them, and it helps to open up a dialogue, and it helps people to feel like, I'm a woman in tech, but I'm also a woman, and I'm also someone who has had, this challenge or this other, experience in my life. So, there's two examples that I can think of that really, I think, have been really helpful for the women in the community. That, the first example is just talking about imposter syndrome. There have been women who have, so accomplished, and they talk about how they felt like they didn't belong, like they were faking it, they were going to get discovered. And the more women talk about those feelings, and, because that feeling is, it grows in darkness. And when you shed light on it and talk about, oh, I feel this way, and someone else says, oh, wait, I feel this way too. And, we're not alone. And it can be really helpful. I know, I had shared in the group recently when I took the job as a professor, I said, I feel so unqualified to do this. What do I know about teaching graduate students? And someone said to me, wait a second, you present on a national level. Like, what are you talking about? You can do this. And it kind of like recentered me, because I was getting very kind of emotional and self-doubting. So talking about those feelings is really important for women. And the other thing is talking about stereotype threat has been really helpful. So when you're the only person of color or the only woman, there's that added layer that you're going into an environment and you're not just there representing you as a person, you're there representing your entire gender or your entire race or, everyone from your religion. So it creates this added pressure that someone from the majority community doesn't experience. So that's one of those feelings that just, again, like that extra pressure when women are talking about that and saying, I'm the only one and I'm feeling like all this pressure because what if I'm not successful? Then, what does it say? They just, it can be really difficult. So I think just, again, that therapeutic environment where people feel safe to share is what also results in a lot of women wanting to come and join us at conferences for little meetups or the STEM in the City events, because we're honoring those feelings and we're not saying what you should feel. We're recognizing this is a feeling. It's very real. And let's talk about how do we, get out of that negative self-talk and have more positive self-talk and be more compassionate to ourselves and recognize the accomplishments that we've had.
No, I think that's great. And I think the thing too that that got me thinking about is a lot of people, I think, sometimes are scared to kind of network or even network at a physical event, whether it's a conference or even just like a meetup at night. But like if they've talked to somebody, on your Slack channel or read about their journey kind of on your blog or whatnot, and they know that person's going to be at a conference or an event or something, it's a lot easier to say like, hey, we should meet up. And then, even if it's like one other person and then you both kind of, almost network together is maybe a stupid way to put it. But if you're both kind of just like, not necessarily talking to each other the whole time, but if the two of you are going around to different kind of groups, introducing yourself, it's a lot easier and it's less scary when there's like you and one or two other people than if it's just you go by yourself, right? Especially if you're kind of early on in your career or maybe a bit younger, or I don't know, like sometimes, like to be 100% honest with you, I started the show because I was scared of public speaking, right? And so for me, it was like a big, and it still kind of is some days. I'm just like, oh, but I think the thing is, it's like getting and inspiring people to push themselves out of their own comfort zone is basically what you're trying to do. And I think at the end of the day, it's not necessarily like you need to go like crazy, but like go to like if you're totally scared of going to events because you're scared of talking to, going up to random strangers, if you meet up with somebody there and now it's that you've maybe chatted with online or in your Slack channel, and then maybe they introduce you to a couple of people. And then the next time you go to an event, some of the people at that event because you've been there before. And then you start making friends and all of a sudden you end up knowing kind of everybody at that event, right? And so, and then after you're more comfortable with that, you tackle something else that you're kind of wanting to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And that's basically what you guys are inspiring people to do, or at least or at least a part of what you guys are trying to do.
Yeah, that's it. And honestly, I think that's Angela and I starting Reigningit together. That was part of it too. Is like, I think it would have been very daunting for us to do this on our own. And, I totally agree with what you're saying about, it can be daunting in getting in it together and helping each other out. And I would always tell my managers, I'm like, there's no I in team, right? When someone does well, it brings up everyone else. It's not like one person is successful to the detriment of everyone else. So I think we have to get out of that crab in a pot mentality where you're like pulling each other down. It's like, no, there's more than enough opportunities for everyone. And, case in point, I think with Angela and I, and if we can do this, and like anyone can do what they want as well.
And the other thing that I really want to stress as well that you guys have covered, and I've had people on the show openly talk about it, is like there's people that have sold companies to like BlackBerry or Google and you name it, and they've made hundreds of millions of dollars that still feel like a fraud, right? Or that they're going to get like found out. And like, so I think just kind of stressing that again, just to people kind of listening, that I think everybody at a certain point kind of feels like they don't deserve what they've kind of accomplished, right? And so I think maybe that never goes away. It's as you get more successful, but if you can acknowledge that other people are feeling that way, even if they never need to work again because they've sold a company and they're in everybody else's eyes, they're extremely successful. A lot of those people still feel like they're not successful at all, which was really eye-opening to me, right? I was like, what are you talking about? Like, right? Like if you've basically, you started something from nothing, you sold it, you never need to work again. That's basically everybody's dream, at least in business, not even tech, right? Like,
Right.
So
that's true. And I feel like I saw that so much firsthand just in Silicon Valley with, the number of founders who are still at the companies that they've started, and case in point with Square and Twitter. And like, it is amazing. And to your point, it goes to show that like, they're not done solving, what they initially set out to do, or what is the next iteration of that? How do we scale this? How do we make this better? And it ultimately goes to your personal value, and that you feel like we're so tied to a movement or initiative or a product that we want to see this all the way through. And I really admire people who do stick to that and don't feel like, oh yeah, well now I'm done and can, cruise from there.
Sure. Well, but sadly, Angela and Saki, we're coming to the end of the show. So let's promote and mention where people can get more information about you guys and check out the blog online.
Sure, absolutely. So our website is reigningit.com. So to spell it, just think about it's like ruling, like a queen in a sense.
Sure.
So REIGNINGIT.com. And we love that as a name because it's really about ruling your own life and not being defined by standards that that society says that you can't do this because you're a girl or, things like that.
Sure.
So that's our website, reigningit.com. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. It's @reigningit. Saki, you want to talk about the blog? Or?
Sure. And then we are on Medium. So that is medium.com and then /@reigningit. And we have all these resources on our website too. So as long as you remember reigningit.com, you can be routed to everything else.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you both being on the show again and taking time out of your day to be on the show. And I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for giving us a platform to share about what we're doing and to support other women. You're a great ally for women in tech.
Well, I appreciate that. I just like having interesting conversations with people, right? And having people like yourselves that are actually doing this stuff, right? And it's also interesting to talk to other people promoting other people, because that's basically what I'm doing. I like having these conversations, but I'm basically promoting other people and kind of what I find interesting. So, I really appreciate it, and I have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, guys. Okay, bye. Thanks for listening. Please visit the show's website at buildingthefutureshow.com. Also check us out on Facebook at Building the Future Show and follow us on Twitter at Building Show. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.